cults, coercion, and sexuality in society. These are the topics for the Frankie Files. I'm Frankie T's your host, and I'll continue to focus on my own family story as well as news and recovery info for those who've survived, especially the adult children of cults. New each Tuesday. See FrankieFilesPodcast.com for more. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 49 of the Frankie Files. This will be a continuation of the Morningland papers. That was episode 46, 47, and 48. We're going to be discussing that today. How you doing, Mom?
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting to be here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, we've gotten feedback, and we'll be including that, and we're also going to be including our thoughts as original Morningland members, first generation, what it was like to hear from Gopi X, to hear about these various stories I compiled about Morningland being a sex cult, and then to hear about Lee O's interview, which was pretty interesting. You ready to get rolling?
I am very ready.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, I'm Frankie, and this is my mom. We started episode 46 in this series with Morningland is a sex cult, and it's been there for 50 years, and I don't think it's been said plainly anywhere that it is. In fact, it was minimized by some people. Yet it's known in various circles, sociology and psychology, that controlling someone's sex, disrupting their life through assigned partners, etc., and breaking up marriages. And then we even talked about forced or coerced vasectomies, even of gay people and gay men. It's pretty incredible. So I had some thoughts on that. Let me get started. The story of Kat is one I told, and that was because I was a direct witness to that story. It just really bothered me, and I was old enough at that time to see what was going on. It bothered me how this woman was used to attract the Navy guy. Shri taught him to get out of the Navy by doing conscientious objector, which he did. So during that instruction, they also were paired up, this woman, and it was really hard to watch. She would even watch from the kitchen on the monitors how awkward they were together, knowing he probably wouldn't be very interesting to her, who was either a sex worker or a prostitute. And I've had so many little hints of stories on blogs that I've read of Morninglanders who say they were assigned to see sex workers. This is some strange stuff that we have yet to uncover. And I personally saw Shri Patricia bring 2 sex workers off of Anaheim. I am not kidding. And I still don't understand what this was all about.
And that's a street in Long Beach.
Yep. In Long Beach, Anaheim is a boulevard of hookers. And this white woman and black woman, she picked up from that area. And I remember because my sister and I were staying there illegally, we were each assigned one of these women to, help show them where to sleep, where we were in the back of the storefront.
One of the storefronts.
Prostitutes brought into training. What's the deal there? Still don't understand any
And
of
then
them.
to assign them to young girls.
And there was never sexuality between me and the prostitutes, so that wasn't the thing. But I just remember her saying we can train and, spiritually progress anyone. It was like she was constantly trying to say and prove that she could turn anyone into whoever she wanted. So that's something I really didn't include in that episode 46 I thought was worth mentioning. Hopefully some people will write us and tell us more about that. But then also our guest, Lisa Van Arsdale, who commented that most cults love and Morningland exhibited this, they like to break up secure attachments. And that began right away with us. That begins right away if you're a married couple. You're told you're on a different spiritual level.
I do remember when I had finally decided to go to Cult Awareness Network after I left and started learning about cults and what they do and what they have done. And I started trying to reach out to other people to do some kind of preventative work. And I got to hear from some of the couples that had left Morningland that talked about their experience of what they were not forced, but their master had told them to do. Not do this, all about their sex life. And some people actually were assigned to other people.
Constantly, by the way. Now I'm finding out that it was constant, that we all were. If you were taken, into training, you were assigned someone sexually, multiple or single. Mm-hmm. And then I loved Lisa Van Arsdale's comments when she said it all plays out like some culty porno.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's good.
This whole thing does.
And it was just so foreign to me. I hadn't been aware of that based on we're not supposed to talk.
Well, also the outer level of members.
Right.
Who had jobs and, weren't in clergy, weren't told jack spit on purpose.
A lot of secrets.
Right.
Lots and lots.
Successfully, they kept those secrets and were, intimidating people into keeping secrets. No matter if you liked it or not, you better not talk about it. And then I loved Lisa Van Arsdale's comments, don't tell mom or dad, which she says is a classic abuse that adults do with children, whether they're relatives or family members or strangers. And she drew a correlation of Morningland doing that, and certainly to us. And that's like pedophile or abuse 101. Well done on that comment. Also, she said they were adding layers of distress by separating family members and other secure relationships. That's really important because when you're in distress, you make bad decisions. And if you're kept in distress, you will continue to make bad decisions. And I think we all are human and we do understand that. It felt really good for me to just go on record and say Morningland is a sex cult because as a victim, which I articulate our story in brief in episode 46, but just to say it, let's get the word out that it's always been in play.
It must have always been in play because these people that I talked to that were early disciples were telling me these stories about mix and match.
Mandatory mix and match. But we can't tell you what to do. But if you do want spiritual growth, this is what you have to do. It is? Okay. The Frankie Files. Okay, moving on. We're going to be reviewing the episode 47 part of the Morningland Papers, The Day Donato Died. Let's start with some feedback from Lee O, one of the original members of Morningland, regarding that very confusing time period. He wrote me to clarify some of it, and let me read it to you. The attempted coup to oust Sri Patricia from Escondido didn't happen until nearly 2 years after Donato's death. He died in November of 76, as was stated, but that attempted coup didn't happen until probably August of 78. In my recollection, Lee says the period from the battle until the beginning of the clearing sessions was quite a nice time of harmony and growth. The battle itself was, of course, a nightmare, but that only lasted about 4 days to a week. And he's referring to there the time of Donato's death. 4 days of chanting took place at 3 locations, all 3 locations, and all members were brought in to do it, and it was extremely strange, in my opinion. Anyway, he goes on. Starting in late fall or early winter of 77, things took an awful turn as for the worst as Sri Patricia began doing clearing sessions. Those were, as Gopi X described, a systematic tearing down of everything one was doing, all kinds of ugly accusations, mostly BS, about the motives of disciples, what kind of tapes, quote marks are used there, we were running on the gopis, blah, blah, blah. Lee states that the male disciples she refers to that at that point considered clearer than the gopis were called the EWS, which stood for Early Warning System. Just another protection from Patricia's paranoid mind, in his opinion. And yes, they got uglier and uglier until the gopis, all except for Gyan, were finally removed, and the entire Escondido temple collapsed, along with most of the EWS. Lee says that happened around August of 78, and he remembers those dates clearly. And thank you for that, Lee, because although in Gopi X's writings, which I read, she states that nearly 2 years later, those clearings and that very strange midnight ceremony, it's still really confusing. So we do appreciate all input on that. Okay, so let's talk more, Mom, about the death of Donato.
I had confusion about how long it took between this and that. I was shocked at it being 2 years.
Well, also, when I spoke with Lee, he didn't know we were put on sabbatical for like 6 months.
True.
Right after the funeral. And so I think there was a ton of that going on. It's super strange, but it's almost like quarantining anyone who she wanted to keep from the current rumors and damage. And it was a lot of it because, as he is clarifying for us here, there's an attempted coup to remove Sri almost 2 years after Donato's death. And that coup was motivated from Escondido.
I really worked on my memory, trying to think about whether I even knew that there was a coup. I don't think I did.
Well, it's odd. I do have a very strange memory, which I put in the memoir. Being in a really large hall, and one of the male, really top, high-level disciples introduced Sri as the current leader of Morningland. And I remember I looked up, and there was also a grumble in the crowd, like, huh? Current leader? As though there was another option? Because, like, they founded it together, right? So there's that. There was a lot there. There's definitely a lot there. Also, I heard something for the very first time ever, as Gopi X, pointed me to what journal entries to read. I was shocked that she started out with that she had heard some people, later disciples, didn't know Donato existed, that he was a physical man, that they thought he was a myth of some sort. I never knew that was propagated in Morningland. How very strange.
Neither did I.
I mean, we both met the man, and we were initiated by him. We were there a year. We were sent on a year and a half, maybe? I don't know. It was very confusing. Okay, so when we returned, and then we really didn't know Sri Patricia from Escondido. She was there most of the time, and Donato and Gopis there were running Long Beach. So this was a big regime change. And when I look back at it and hear everyone's pieces that we have so far in 47 and 48, Lee and Gopi X paint a picture of what an opportunist she was.
The Frankie Files.
What is a gopi? A gopi is a Sanskrit term for a high-level clergy, religious priestess, female. And there was a group around the original master, Donato. I always wondered how that worked. If they're married and he had a ring of gopis, was it like orgies? What the heck was going on there? Anyway, a gopi is often the person that was out front reading, doing lectures, and teaching classes. They're the clergy of the temple. And that's who was kicked out when Shri finally realized that if she was going to succeed, or maybe she heard wind of the coup, and if she was going to succeed, she had to kick out all the upper clergy that Donato trained. At some point, she had to realize that they were loyal to him, not her. Also, what stood out for me, I'd always wondered about this day, but to hear Gopi X describing Shri lurking in the background was super upsetting for me personally. You know, I was at this lodge. I ate food with her that she prepared. I was up in this attic and being sexually abused up there. Sometimes I look back and go, oh my God, was I in the company of a killer?
I can understand why you would feel that way.
So disturbing.
It is disturbing to be in the same place and doing the same things.
Cooking that pasta like he taught her to make. He taught her and she taught me. Ugh. I'm a true crime story. But they also hid his death from the members that were still sleeping. That was strange. Was the priority to hide the death? Why? And then Shri had at the ready. He had put all his time into getting ready for this day. This is meant to be. She was quick. And then, isn't it strange to hear how crazy chanting to save Morningland? What a concept. Now, Mom, I was recently watching the La Luz de Mundo documentary, and it's like they did the same thing. It's a 100-year church, restoration Christian church, but when one of the brothers or the father died, the brother was next in line, was going to get it no matter what. And they had them gnashing and praying, the whole congregation around the world, gnashing their teeth and praying for weeks so that the vision would be clear who should be the next leader. It was all a ruse. And it feels like so much like this. Like, this man dies. Shri and Donato had been having public arguments in front of some of the board members previous to this.
I do remember that.
You hear that?
Mm-hmm. I do remember people talking about that she had, he had yelled at her, telling her that she didn't know what she was talking about. And I don't know the subject, but they were very upset. So,
right. They were having a difference in vision.
In opinion on something, but right in front of the whole crew.
Yeah, and she was so dramatic. So when he dies, she does like kind of like what La Luz de Mundo did. We must save Morningland. Everyone to your positions and chant. Like your life depends on it. Our lives depend on it. And she said that it was dark forces are trying to close the vortex.
Right. We had to get Donato's spirit up to the mothership up above Long Beach. Yeah, I remember that.
And you can do more research, people who are listening, in 1978. And this is also an article on x-morninglanders.com. I believe it was a San Diego paper articulating these clearing sessions, articulating the mass excusals, the legal issues they were facing in Escondido that pretty much forced the hand for Shri to move to Long Beach. And she also brought Saravati. I now know like how much they used sabbaticals to control people and send them away at various times where she could control the narrative. That's so strange to me.
The Frankie Files.
Okay, episode 48 was an introduction to our first interview with an ex-member, Lee O. And he was an early member, first-generation member who was initiated by Donato, like my family. So we had met the man, we had spent time with the man, and we will get into that in my mom's interview in the future. But a couple of things stood out for me hearing Lee's interview. But let's get to yours first. So talk to me, Mom, about what it was like hearing Lee's story.
Well, I remember Lee. I became a disciple in 75. And I just remember Lee. and I know he has quite a different view on life, on religion, on what transpired in Morningland. But I am so appreciative of him giving his thoughts, because quite honestly, as I was listening to the interview, I was able to go back and listen and remember things, connect things that seems like another life ago.
Mm-hmm.
However, it also allowed me to again face what Morningland really was. And I'm using it as a was because that was when I was there. But it is also what Morningland is. It is not new. It is not gone. It is still pumping away and hurting people. I know this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to know the people that are new disciples, etc. I know the people that are old disciples. They haven't changed.
Right. And one of my struggles as a person who was young in Morningland is connecting to the other kids. You know, you guys have a different perspective. You went there as adults. And the whole time I'm listening to Lee, I'm hearing his perspective, which I wanted to hear. I didn't really get to do that like some other people. So hearing Lee's perspective really opened up my memory too, just like you. And I'm sure other listeners are going through this that are ex-Morninglanders. One of the topics Lee brought up early is that he had asked Mary. He had asked her if she did drugs with Donato. She mentioned that she did acid with Donato, like a guided trip. And, you know, while it was hidden while I was there, I think that drugs were going on in Morningland throughout. And at some point, they probably got legal advice to keep it quiet. But he speaks about, you know, Mary doing drugs with Donato, doing acid with Donato. And I'm plagued with why I was, you know, revived with smelling salts at the lodge multiple times. I know I was somehow given drugs, and I don't know how or what they were.
I remember your sister talking about that.
Yeah.
She was there.
Right. Absolutely. She saw me getting revived with smelling salts.
Yes.
Yep. Right. And these memories are vague because probably, I'm guessing the drugs erased my memory. But it's like he said he never saw anyone outwardly doing drugs. So when I saw the Rajneesh documentary, I remember that they were dosing their own members to keep control of them. They would serve them beer, but they would put like relaxants in it to make sure, because they had recruited a bunch of homeless people to make sure they wouldn't have any psychotic episodes or go off on the kids, to control them. And I wonder how many ashrams, quote mark, had this policy, because it did seem like a thing in the 70s. It's very disturbing to me to wonder about that, all that unfettered time I spent with Shri. But he speaks about his encounter with Donato not being a drug experience. And that was really interesting to hear him compare it to a near-death experience.
Near-death experience like Lee. But I had a similar experience that was transcending, if you will. It was out-of-body experience. It was within our evening meditation as a group. This was in 76, I believe. And it was pre-death of Dan. And it was beautiful music. I loved Morningland's music. Lee, I loved Morningland's music. I was viewing the room from on top of my head, as if I were sitting on top of my head, and everybody's body had light in it, like a round energy of light. That's all I saw. I didn't see the human body. And it had a very calming effect on me to calm the nerves that I had from a very difficult week in my real life. So after the music was done, I went right back into my body. So I feel very lucky, because I understand that a lot of people that have out-of-body experiences have difficult time getting back in their body. I can understand that. I didn't really want to go back into this, but because it's pain here on Earth. It's a lot of pain.
And Lee mentions Donato's mild-mannered demeanor. He was like an everyday guy.
You know, I was thinking about the difference, thank you, Lee, also thinking about the difference of Pat and Dan.
Right.
And the whole time that I was that Dan was in Long Beach before his death, I ran into him a number of times during class and in between classes and stuff like that. I never felt nervous. I never felt, like, oh, look, there he is. You know, like some people get. I felt very comfortable. I didn't have any bad, ill feelings at all. Now, fast forward to the rest of my time in Morningland. Anxious. Fear, and fear.
Right.
And yet, I remember Dan talking about the astral planes, and if you, don't do what you're supposed to do, I guess. How did he put it? It was a fear thing about the astral planes, You'll
get stuck there, I think.
Get stuck in the astral planes, yeah, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So it was still there.
Yeah.
That topic of fear was still being used, I guess, on the gopis to hold them in line. I think that's what you were talking about, Lee.
Sabbaticals were an interesting topic Lee brought up. And it really did surprise me how much of that was being used to control people, almost like a quarantine, like I mentioned in another segment. The control factor is really important. We didn't have the internet, so it was just like news articles or whatever they would have to control us from seeing. But Sri needed to maintain that control after Donato's death, or the church probably would have fallen into some other person's hands. And it was so aggressive. If you said or did the wrong thing, and Lee discusses, he was put on sabbatical for 6 months and have to move out of the house of the person you're living with, who is your partner in life. Like, so uprooting. And it was so cruel. It stood out for me, the cruelty of constantly breaking up couples for their, quote, spiritual development. He tells the story of how his wife, Celine, was sat down by Sri and told, if you want him to grow spiritually, you need to divorce him. They'd been married several years. That's just astounding and cruel. And they did follow those orders. I didn't even know that happened. And how many stories like this?
I kind of think he wasn't alone on that. Number of people separated.
We know, right?
Yeah.
I already know. Like, there was also gay couples who were treated this way and then told this isn't your partner.
Right.
Not necessarily the making them, well, there was a gay guy who was made to date women, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. Sexual disorientation for control. That's the reason I think it's important that the public understands Morningland is a sex cult, because sex cults are about controlling their members. in every way, including your fallopian tubes and everything, all the equipment for breeding. We're going to control that. Well, they didn't want babies, clearly,
The Frankie Files.
That Donato's death was at a couples seminar makes me realize what a grift it's been for them for so long, these couples, quote marks. The Catholic Church does this couples counseling too. It's like, what is your goal, though? To control the couples, to get their money, to entrench them in these long sessions that are a series. It's not just one-time thing. But I didn't know Donato was doing them. I guess what I'm getting at is it's a pretty good grift, couples counseling. And so these couples seminars, one of them I was at, which is, again, really spooky. I helped Shri create the pasta. She taught me their secret recipe. Helped her, I was her go-to slave. Preparation, we did all this, and they arrived, and I remember sitting ready to serve whoever needed it of the upper clergy, and I think there was 2 or 3 people there, Sri Donato, maybe X5 or someone else, and one of the couples starts confessing that they had sex. They were because they're, quote, in training in this group. I don't even remember, there were so many different spiritual orders created. It was one of the strange manipulations. She would be like, you're in training now. You're in this new group, a special order called Kamazi, called Gopi, called the Daughters of Isis, called EWS, Early Warning System, called the Tribunal, Kshatriya. Oh, it was unlimited. So in this, they start confessing they had sex. And they were only, because they had been initiated into this group, they were only supposed to have non-coital sex. These are married couples. You're telling them they can't have penetration. Like, it's a sex cult. And I just remember the torture on this married couple's face. Like, we've always been doing this. It's like almost impossible not to. And I'm thinking, I need to go. Get me out of this room. Oh my God. I don't want to hear one more second. It was torture for everyone. We're just sitting, almost like you're just sitting there like, stop talking about sex so we can not be turned on and not do anything about it. Like, I feel like the revving up of people and then deprivation of sex was another thing. She gave everybody blue balls. It was fun for her. Quite a sick individual when you look back at it.
When you're talking about Dan, who has abandoned 2 families
I know.
prior to this, guiding married couples, okay.
Well, I interviewed a guy who went to be a missionary in training, and he was being trained, a young person, like barely 18. He was being trained to do couples counseling for Catholic Church.
The Frankie Files.
When I asked Lee what were the clearing sessions like, he was like, they were absolute psychological torture. But do you remember, what was shocking to me, Mom, is that he said there would be a list in the hall.
That's what I don't remember.
I forgot. Oh my God, that's so...
You remember that?
It makes sense.
Wow.
It makes sense. It's almost like Auschwitz. You go to the left and you go to the right. Like you're set for destruction. Because it was destruction. If you got put on this chopping block, everyone had their shot. And it was so much like Synanon or Scientology. One, the attack therapy in Synanon, which purported, which was a lie, that this is a safe space where you can say anything, and people used it to degrade someone they didn't like. And then Scientology, she stole this idea of clearing the planet, and she would call it a clearing session, meaning what's in your mind needs to be clear before you are, in connection to the master or your higher self. What's blocking you? And of course, that would be used at any time to bother anyone. Remember those clearing sessions?
Very vaguely.
Oh yeah, because you blocked it out.
I'm remembering what Lee said about being a fool and standing up and speaking during one of those. I wasn't. I never said one word.
That was the thing, is I watched you become mute over the years because you literally, it's like you're outnumbered. What do you say? Everything you're going to say, they will turn it into some strange narrative. Example, if you say, and while you worked nights at the post office, an incredible, difficult thing to work graveyard, of course you're going to be more frustrated if you get woken up during the day by your daughters. And I know you mentioned something about it, and they turned it into you're a bad mom. Over time, that's what you were healed of. And then, as you know, that went in some kind of book.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, wait a minute. You scoundrels. Healed of? Oh, I don't think so. That's a whole nother episode, though, the fake healing. We are going to go there.
Yeah. We are. So many things that we don't know. And whether we believe what somebody else has experienced or we interpret it differently, it's always helpful to have more information than no information. This is going to be helpful.
Definitely. And since I had left in 87, I never got more information. It's like there was a group of people that were all kicked out in early 80s, 82, 83, 84, who gravitated together. The rest of us were disconnected from that island of people. And looking back at it now, there's a complete gap from 2003 to now in news articles. Meaning that, yes, this website existed, but they've done a great job, Morningland, of making it not reach their next victim. And this is what our show is about. Yes, it is about Morningland, but it's also about spotting the behavior of cults. And for me, with knowing that Morningland is in their 50th year, they've clearly figured out how to go under the radar of having people live there illegally, of claiming fake healings, of running a sex cult, of getting access to young people and getting them separated from their parents, and it can last a lifetime. This was a great effort, and we're going to have another round of the Morningland papers. You can bet on that as people are starting to come out of the woodworks and get into our email.
Good.
Yeah, so give me a knuckles. Thanks,
Clank.
Mom. This is going where we want it to go. And one of the differences is there's never been a podcast that's covering Morningland, and there's never been a true crime angle that we're coming at it from. We are not interested in romanticizing the time in Morningland. It hurt a lot of people, and while some people want to focus on the tortoise and how cute they dress and they give bread to the community, just know that's the storefront that's there to put you off, just like the Yellow Deli is in 12 Tribes. But the people get abused in 12 Tribes once they get trapped in, and they have trouble getting out, just like I did. Now, if you are a young person that was in Morningland, we especially want to hear from you above all else. It has been wonderful to get with a Gopi who was original member early in this cult. We also got a young man who, went at around 25 all the way from Pennsylvania to move to California for this cult. What about the kids? One of the things that's been frustrating for me is that I know other people were abused. And I haven't ever seen any news or websites properly reflect that. And in speaking out, I'm really hoping that I give you guys that were there the courage to come forward like me. And you don't have to use a lot of personal information once we get you verified. I encourage you to contact the show by going to frankiefilespodcast.com. We want to hear from you. If you were a young person when you were at this cult, Morningland, we want to hear from you especially. Got to look out for those cult kids. It's easier to talk to people who went in as an adult. They don't have the attitude that someone like me has?
Well, one of the things that I learned in my research through Cult Awareness Network is that the adults that go into an organization, whether they be 20, that's pretty young, but college era, or 40, we have a life to go back to. We have something prior to our experience in a cult. The children like my daughters that came in at an early age don't really have much to go back to. You don't want to go back to an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old. Life has become what they experienced in a cult. It's special. It's a special need. We need to talk.
And we need to get those stories out, so we're ready to do so.
I am so appreciative of the people that have been coming forward with information. For those of us that have lapse of memory from certain times, like me, there were times where I just don't remember what was going on. Maybe it was just because I wasn't involved in what was going on. That's true. But it's so very helpful. Gopi X, thank you so much. This has caused me to do further facing of the truth about Morningland and what it is. I had to face the facts about Dan Sperato and who he was as a man. I had to face the facts. I am facing the facts of who Pat was. I'm still facing the fact of who Peggy is.
Saravati.
I'm still facing the fact of who Shokru is, Mary, and Terry Smith.
Mom.
These interviews have shown me that it's really important to hear from people their experiences, because we get to see through their eyes. That's the easiest thing I can say is, oh, I never thought of it that way, or oh, thank you for filling in that blank, or I did not know that took place.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to Frankie Files Podcast. If you want to support the show, check out frankiefilespodcast.com. You can also check out my Substack, which has other content, frankietees.substack.com. And thanks, Mom, for your commentary and your upcoming interview that we're going to do.
You're welcome.
Bye, Frankie's Mom.
Bye, Frankie.
The Frankie Files.